really just kudos to all of you guys for being here, for paying attention, and for taking the time and for making it. Be careful as you're going home and all that. Hopefully the weather will get better for us throughout the day and not end up getting worse. Huge shout out to Alan and his crew at Clean River Partners and to Mark and his crew at Minnesota Soil Health Coalition. Heck of an event here to get everyone together and have a conversation here just about the potential. And I did want to start with that. We called this event Getting Paid for, based on low carbon farming, right? Really, it needs to be potentially getting paid for low carbon farming. We've got to start with that from the very beginning. Potentially, it could be incredible. That's why I completely flipped my company on its head about 15 months ago, went all in this space. It is by far, I think, the biggest opportunity that we've got in agriculture, but we still don't know all the details yet. And you're going to hear that a lot throughout the day. Potential for some of this money, potential for these tax credits, potential for farmers to be part of the solution. But the real thing is we don't know exactly yet. The problem is we don't know when the rules are going to come. We have no idea. It's government. We're not going to sit and wait, though. We cannot wait for all the details and all the rules because we know enough. We know enough about the data that we got to collect. We know enough that there's some opportunity coming down the pipeline, and we need to get ready for it. A huge angle for this, and so excited that we've got some of our friends from the biofuel industry here. You're going to hear from them, and you're going to hear that we have a lot of unknowns in this. A lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. However, farmers are part of the solution here. Farmers are part of the future of being able to decarbonize. So many of you in the room are already doing a great job, and we want to show you what your scores are, make sure that you've got some data, and make sure that you're ready. If these rules get written the way that the law states, our friends at the biofuel industry are really going to need us and need our data and need us ready to help them decarbonize. We're part of their story. Today, we're part of the problem, and I'll lay that out. But we have an amazing opportunity to be part of the solution. There's multiple other stackable solutions. We're going to dig into that. But we are part of this overall equation, and all of you that are in the room are out on the cutting edge here, ready to take this opportunity and really run with it. All right, let me see if my stuff's going to actually work here. I might have to, can I have one of my people come help? Thanks, Carolyn. Shout out to a bunch of my crew that's here as well. They're going to be running around as we're running CI scores here this afternoon. Carolyn is our VP of Operations. Steve is over here. Jessica is our VP of Sales somewhere way in the back. And Sophia is our topsoil grasshopper. She's ran more CI scores than just about anybody. So a whole bunch of my team here. We'll get into some of that here later. But let me dig in to kind of the initial keynote. You can watch on the slides over here on the side too. And we'll hammer through this. What we got now, like 30 minutes or so for this initial 30 minutes. So I'm going to go fast. We have plenty of time for more questions. We're going to cruise through this here, okay? Number one, Al already was talking about. I'm a farmer myself, 7th generation on my family's farm. We'll move this for some of you guys. There you go. 7th generation on my family's farm, and been having some good success with a lot of these practices, and with these practices for the last multiple years. My family been no-tilling since the late 70s, cover cropping, and just trying to figure out how do we make these soil health principles work on our farm. I'm down in southeast Iowa, okay, about 4.5 hours southeast of here, down in Washington County, and there's a lot of these practices going on, and as you guys are seeing, these practices are continuing to gain speed. But they have to be done to the context of your farm, right? What I do on my farm in southeast Iowa is not going to work the exact same here, and what you guys do on your farm isn't going to work the exact same on my farm down in Iowa. But we still have to continue to build soil health. We still have to implement these principles correctly, and then we can tell our story. One of those metrics for telling our story is with carbon intensity scores. That's one of the metrics. It's going to be a lot of different things. So sustainability can take a lot of different angles to it. But carbon intensity is this new thing. We'll get into that, but it takes data. Okay, starting with the soil health principles, because we're going to talk today about tax credits. There's potential for some money in them. There's potential for us to be able to maybe tap into some of that on our farms, sharing with our friends at the ethanol plant. But it's a federal tax credit. Stroke of a pen, it could be gone. The goalpost could continue to change. What doesn't change and what is ongoing are these principles. These principles come from Mother Nature. These principles are what made our soils here some of the best in the entire world. And we have to continue to emulate Mother Nature and implement these principles to the context of your farm. Carolyn, I'll cruise through a bunch of these. On our farm, that armor is part of the pesticide program. It's part of the moisture management program. It's part of the temperature management program. We've got to utilize that armor to our benefit. We've got to minimize the disturbance on that farm. If we're going to build up our biological function, get better nutrient cycling, if we're going to actually build up that system, build up that microbial food web, we can't be destroying them all the time, whether that be with tillage or with over-application of pesticides. So it's about reducing, okay? It doesn't have to be an absolute. And you guys will see here later today with CI scoring, reducing tillage helps your score, but it's also about, we still gotta have yield. And we still gotta have some balance to this as well, but minimizing that disturbance as much as we can. The whole system is fed by living roots. We have that sunlight energy that we can pump down into our soils with photosynthesis. Plants taking in sunlight energy and CO2, converting that to simple sugars, pumping those sugars down into the soil to feed the microbes. It's with improved microbial biomass that we actually can build up organic matter and actually build up our stable soil organic carbon. But it starts with living roots. The more we can get those living roots pumping sugars down in the ground, the more active our soil system can be, and the more returns we can get. The ability to lower our fertilizer, lower our pesticides, be more resilient, whether we're going to be too dry this year or now we're getting a little bit of moisture, maybe we are going to have some moisture. But no matter what Mother Nature throws at us, we've got to be resilient. Above ground, we can enable more species diversity to get more diversity going below ground. Okay, different plants above ground pump different compounds into the soil and feed different types of microbial species. Different microbes do different function, right? Some of them cycle nitrogen, some of them fix nitrogen, some of them cycle phosphorus, some of them help to kill pathogens and diseases. All those different diverse functions have to be driven by diverse food going into the systems. We need to be thinking about that on our farm. Lastly, wherever possible, getting livestock back out there on that back out onto the land, just like the buffalo grazing the prairie, getting that manure, the saliva, the urine out there in the field to really jumpstart this system even further. All right, let's dig through the CI stuff here now. Again, hedging this very hard from the beginning, right? That there is huge potential here. We also don't know the rules. We've got to get ahead of this, but I'm so bullish on this because of this slide. The United Nations does their big climate conference every year. It's called COP. A couple years ago was COP26, and some of the biggest financial institutions in the world put together a pact saying that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. Okay, these are some of the big hedge fund companies, the big banks, right? The big Wall Street guys. They're the investors in all the corporations. They're saying we got to be carbon neutral by 2050. And these groups that came together in this pact, they control 60% of the global wealth, $130 trillion under management, okay, the big dogs. And they're saying we got to decarbonize. In order for the big guys with the money to decarbonize, that means the things that they're an investor in or the bank for, aka the corporations, they've got to decarbonize. In order for those companies to decarbonize, their supply chain has to decarbonize, which includes us on the farm and involved in agriculture. We're part of pretty much every single supply chain, whether that be fuel, like we're going to talk about today, or meat, or milk, whatever your product may be, we are part of their supply chain. So as these companies look to meet their goals, they've got to factor us in as part of the equation. We were talking before, there's more rules coming out from the SEC about some of the reporting that these folks have to do. It's being pushed very hard in Europe and absolutely continuing to come here. So that's why this stuff is not going away. It's the finance sector that's going to continue to push. They've been trying to do this over the last couple of years, right? All these different carbon offset programs. They have some carbon that they're emitting. They're going to continue to. They're reducing what they're emitting, okay? They're reducing. They have to keep reducing, but then they're buying credits for what they can't offset themselves. But things are changing here. This is a really important slide to set up the day. Most of the carbon programs that you guys have heard of in the past are on the left-hand side here, carbon offsets. Carbon offsets, voluntary carbon credits, where you're creating a carbon credit and it's based upon the rules of a registry. And when you create a credit, it can be verified on a registry and sold into the voluntary carbon market where anybody can buy it. Call it Microsoft or whoever, right? So in these carbon credit programs, you have to abide by the registry's rules. And those rules include additionality, right? You have to have practice change. Those rules include permanence. You have to hold that carbon for 100 years. And so there's a lot of red tape to them. But it's because the rules are written by the registries. And today, only about 1% of global carbon credits come from agriculture. So that's why some of these rules have been a little funky. And you guys probably looked at some of these. Some of them have worked pretty well. I know TrueTerra is a sponsor here today. They've obviously had a lot of success with their program, and some others have as well. But those are carbon credits or carbon offsets. Okay, there's a shift happening though, where there's more insetting going on and more carbon insets, where there's a little bit more flexibility, not as much rigmarole to being able to participate. In carbon offsets, you have to abide by the registry's rules, and you got to be competitive with all these other global carbon credits. In carbon insetting, instead of the credit being sold to anybody, the credit stays within the supply chain. For example, we did a big project with Nestle last year, where Nestle said, okay, we want to decarbonize and we source from these states. Let's buy some carbon credits specifically from some farmers in our supply shed. And it opened up a lot more flexibility to the rules. It was better dollars and no long-term contracts. It was just a one-year kind of thing. So there's opportunity like that. Instead of selling to anybody, carbon insets in the supply chain. But they're still based on a ton of carbon. What we're going to talk about today is a third option. It's carbon intensity. So instead of creating a credit or a 1 metric ton of CO2, now we're talking about calculating the footprint per bushel. And what we show is that bushel converted to an energy unit of measure, which is a carbon intensity score, or the grams of CO2 equivalent per bushel or per megajoule. Eventually, it's got to be per grams per BTU as well. There's these unit conversions needed in the energy space. We'll dig into it a little bit more. But anyway, so carbon intensity, where instead of creating a credit sold to somebody else and then sell your grain separately, now we're talking about the carbon footprint data and the bushels staying together. The opportunity that's driving this is in the biofuel space. In order to get these credits, a biofuel company has to look at their entire footprint. Okay? They have to look at what happens in their scope 1 carbon footprint, which is what happens at the ethanol plant. Okay? And I'm going to use ethanol going forward, okay? But this same kind of reporting applies to any company. And in these tax credits, it's also about biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. But if you hear me talk ethanol, just know it also means other biofuels. So say, for example, at the ethanol plant, they have to look at what is their footprint at the plant. That's their scope 1 carbon footprint, their direct emissions. They look at their indirect emissions, which is those emissions coming from the energy being utilized. Is it fossil fuel energy? Is it renewable energy like wind and solar? Those tie into the scope 2 carbon footprint. But why we're here today is really to discuss the scope 3 carbon footprint, which is coming from the supply chain, aka us on the farm. We are part of the supply chain for the biofuel industry. And as this progresses, I'm very bullish that, say for example, the pork industry, they're going to be looking at what is their carbon footprint, and corn and our products on our farm is part of their carbon footprint because it's part of that scope 3 reporting. keep on going here. So the opportunity is coming because of a new tax credit. This tax credit was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So it was signed into law in August of 2022. So it's signed into law, and in the law it says that biofuel producers, clean fuel producers, can earn a tax credit for lowering their carbon intensity score. And it says in the law that they're going to utilize a model developed by the Argonne National Lab, which is over in Chicago, or in the Chicago area. It's a lab underneath the U.S. Department of Energy. And at that lab, they developed a tool called the GREET model. And the GREET model is basically the scoring calculator for how a biofuel producer can get their carbon footprint. Part of that GREET model is a feedstock calculator, which is what we're going to use today, where we can calculate our carbon footprint of our bushels utilizing this GREET model. So Continuum Ag, we saw this couple, after the law was passed and said, holy smokes, this is what I've been looking for. I've been in the carbon space since 2019 and just so frustrated of why can't I calculate my actual carbon footprint. The GREET model is not perfect. It's far from it. And you guys will find some funkiness as you're playing around with it here this afternoon. Really, really funky, but it's still the best thing that we got. And it's the gold standard in the biofuel space. So that's what we're going to be using. Now, there's a brand new updated version of the GREET model due to come out anytime. It was supposed to come out on March 1st, and they punted. I had a little birdie tell me yesterday, potential for this new GREET model to come out on Friday. I'm not holding my breath. But point being is, as we run your scores today, just know that we've got the data in topsoil, and when there's this new GREET model, we just have to hit recalculate, rerun the score. We'll let you all know that the score that you run today versus when we're actually running scores and reporting them, it's going to be slightly different. But anyway, so this GREET model is what's being utilized, and the tax credit is due to start on January 1st. Now again, it's supposed to start on January 1st. We don't have the rules. Hopefully we get the rules relatively soon, but no matter what, these ethanol companies, we know that they've got to get their carbon intensity score below this magic number of 50. According to the Renewable Fuels Association, the average carbon intensity score for U.S. ethanol is about 53. Throughout this presentation, you'll see 53, you'll see 55. Every ethanol plant has a slightly different starting point. But we're already significantly better than fossil fuel gasoline. And that's why with the renewable fuel standard, we're blending fossil fuel gasoline with low carbon renewable energy to decarbonize the overall transportation space. However, these companies are looking at decarbonizing even further and then get the tax credit. The potential maxes out at 2 cents per point reduced per gallon. I'll get into that next. But biofuel manufacturers, if they want to get after these tax credits, they've got to look at how can they reduce their scope 1 carbon footprint at the plant. They can do that with carbon capture and storage, CCS. That could be done with a pipeline where you capture your CO2 and then pump it somewhere else that has the right geological formation to store that liquid carbon. So that's going to be one of the big things. You'll hear that today, a huge opportunity to lower the carbon intensity score. Option 2, more renewable energy. But we're already doing quite a bit of that, and these tax credits start in 9 months. So it's going to be tough to push that one that much further. Option 3, and it's not an option, but it's part of the entire system. But the third lever is on the farm. Low carbon corn to go into producing low carbon biofuel, and that's what we're going to focus on here today. A lot of companies are starting to catch on. We just announced a deal last week that with Siouxland Energy, they're an ethanol plant over near Sioux City, and they were the first ones to publicly come out on a deal with us saying, hey, we don't know all the rules yet, and we don't know how this is going to work, but if there's opportunity, we want our farmers to participate. So Siouxland Energy said, we want to lead the charge on this. We want to bring this opportunity to farmers, but we don't know the rules. And we said, okay, that's fine. We will go help to get the farmers at Continuum Ag. We can help farmers and spread the word like what we're doing today. We can help farmers to get their data organized, like we're going to start today. And we help farmers to get verified carbon intensity scores. Because if the tax credit is able to utilize that farm data, we better be ready to rock and roll. And as you're going to see today, it is way too big a potential to sit on the sideline. We have got to get ahead of this because our friends at the biofuel plants need us. So, sorry this is kind of small. We do have all this recorded and the slides will be out there later. A lot of stuff on my website and such here as well. But overall, the ethanol plant, as long as they meet some red tape, which includes having a registered apprenticeship program and meet prevailing wage, there's some red tape, but the ethanol plant at the end of 2025 would report their carbon intensity score to the IRS to get these tax credits. How it works is they've got to get below 50. 50 is the magic number. Most ethanol plants, like I said before, are at 53, 55, kind of in that range, okay? So they're off the left-hand side of this chart. So number one, we got to get below 50. And that's part of where we can help. It's also part of where utilizing carbon pipelines, things like that, they really jumpstart the system. But we only have 9 months. So we've got to get our data organized on the farmer side. That's the major driver. Magic number is we got to get below 50. Say, for example, at the end of 2025, the ethanol plant reports their CI score and it ends up being an average of 40. Since they are 10 points below the magic number of 50, 10 points, and as long as they meet prevailing wage, registered apprenticeship, the red tape, take that 10-point reduction times 2 cents, that means they got 20 cents per gallon in tax credit. But in order to get that 20 cents per gallon, which a lot of ethanol plants are around 100 million gallons or so of fuel produced. Every single one's a little different, right? Some are close to 60 million gallons. Some of them are huge, massive. But if they reduce by about 10 points at 2 cents per point, 20 cents a gallon, some serious money. But in order to create that credit, it takes data. It's got to go through verification. It's got to go through an audit process with the CPA firm. It takes data. But the magic number being 50. As plants get their, just a second. As plants get the carbon capture pipelines going, that reduces the score by about 30 points. So that basically cuts the footprint in half. Huge reduction, okay? And big time dollar opportunity, not just in these credits, but in the incoming market for sustainable aviation fuel and other offtake opportunities. You're going to hear a lot about that here today. Option 2 is more of those energy reductions. Option 3 is on the farm. That's what I'm going to get into next. Our bushels are part of the overall calculation. And as we lower the footprint of our bushels, we contribute a lower carbon footprint to the ethanol. Go ahead, sir.
Where's that money coming from?
Great questions. Where's the money coming from? It's the government. They print it, remember? No, I'm just kidding. That was bad. Okay, so how the money works is the ethanol company reports their carbon intensity score to the IRS come tax season in 2026, right? This is a long cash flow issue here. So we're doing the low carbon farming now, starting to sell that low carbon corn coming out of the field in Q4 of this year and then selling all throughout 2025. And they don't actually report on their taxes till 2026. So the ethanol company, though, say they create $20 million worth of tax credit, they can utilize those credits to reduce their tax liability. So if they were due to pay $10 million in taxes, they've got $20 million worth of tax credit. They don't pay those $10 million worth of taxes because they have $20 million worth of tax credit. They have $10 million left over after they offset their tax liability. They can sell those credits on the open market. Currently, these type of credits go for 92 to 96 cents on the dollar. So the money flow would be reducing what they would have paid to the government or selling the credits to somebody else, call it Goldman Sachs or some big company, right? They could buy the tax credits for cash and reduce their tax liability. Now, a lot of the ethanol plants are farmer-owned co-ops, right? They don't pay federal income tax directly. The liability is passed on to the shareholders. So in that case, they will sell all of the tax credit, most likely. They will sell all of the tax credit, the full, call it $20 million. We'll sell all of those on the open market for cash and utilize that cash to pay back the operating lines and be able to actually finance this whole system. But it's not the IRS writing a check. It's not the taxpayer directly writing a check to the ethanol plant. Now, roundabout, this is all tax credit. It's all federal dollars, but it's a reduction in what the company would have paid in taxes, not necessarily a direct handout. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Let me show some more stuff. So out of the ethanol company's overall score, say they're at about 55 today, every single county has a default score. And we can pop up some of them later and shout out a couple of the default counties, okay? What we usually use is the default number of 29.1. Every single bushel on your operation already has a CI score. Whether you want to get your score, whether you get it verified, whether you think this is all BS or not, your corn has a score. That score is a default for every single county. And that default score comes, again, from the GREET model I mentioned before, developed by the U.S. Department of Energy. It's a default score for every county. Our opportunity here is to replace that score. Because that score sucks. It's really high, and by and large, our farmers are doing significantly better. Go ahead, Carolyn. So the ethanol plant needs to lower their footprint. We don't know exactly how the math is going to work for the farmer. However, when you convert from bushels or from gallons to bushels, you take that 2 cents per gallon multiplied by your conversion from bushels to gallons. We use the most conservative number that we can, where when you sell a bushel of corn, 2.7 gallons of ethanol come out. Some plants are significantly better, close to 3 gallons of ethanol, but we use the conservative 2.7. So you take the 2 cents per gallon maximum tax credit, multiplied by the conversion from gallons to bushels. That means that every point that you reduce on your farm is worth a potential 5.4 to 6 cents per point reduced per bushel. Now that's not what you are going to get. We have no idea what the farmer is going to get. But the opportunity that we bring to the table adds up in a big, big way. And if these credits come through the way that we want them to, there's a big pie that we're growing here, big pie of money, and everything points to there's going to be plenty for the farmers and for our ethanol friends, our biofuel friends, to make some serious cash. Hold on, Carolyn, go back one. So at Continuum Ag, we've been scoring bushels like crazy, and we're going to get a lot of them here today too. By the end, we are already at 185 million bushels that we have scored. It's been incredible. 185 million bushels, and the average CI score of those bushels is 10.7. So instead of being at 29 and taking the U.S. Department of Energy's number, it's our job on the farm to say, we're doing better. We're doing a good job. And we can go further, right? We can all do better. But we're doing a lot better job than what the Department of Energy gives us credit for, at least by and large. And what we're going to do is get all you guys your score here today as well. If you've got to take off, just make sure that you just hit us up. We're happy to still honor getting you your score later. There's a lot of you here. We're going to get as many of them done as we possibly can. But if we don't get to you today, happy to do it when we all get back home. We also have discount codes for your friends or your neighbors or other family members that weren't able to make it today. I'll show that in a little bit. But overall, the ethanol companies have potential to go after some of these credits. We don't know the rules yet. We don't know when the rules are going to be written. Therefore, we don't have 100% certainty. But what I can guarantee is you'll get paid zero if you don't have data. And that's where we're starting, is what is your actual score, and showing you the potential to collaborate with our ethanol friends to go after these credits together. So I mentioned our average score today. We've scored 185 million bushels already, and the average score 10.7. That's essentially a 20-point drop between the baseline and the farmer. 20-point drop at 5.4 cents. That's $1.08 a bushel. Not $1.08 to the farmer. We have no idea what the farmer piece is going to be, but $1.08 for us to go and bring to our rural communities. And every single farm is going to be a little different, but on average, it's worth about $1.08 is what we've seen so far. But what you guys need to know is what is your actual score, so that you can help your biofuel producer, or the co-ops got to get on this too. The elevators, the co-ops, they have a huge role to play here to help us to aggregate bushels, blend, and get these scores at scale, because we got to have volume. A typical ethanol plant's buying 20, 30, 40 million bushels of corn every year. If they only have a handful of farmers that know their data, it doesn't move the needle, because it's based on a weighted average of the entire volume of bushels that they're buying. Every single bushel has a score. It's either the default or it's our actual data. And what we are doing is getting farmers verified as to what their actual score is. Let's keep going. Let's hammer through the rest of it and call it good. On my farm, my score last year was negative 4.1. I've been doing these regenerative practices for a while. We're all no-till, cover cropping, about 155 units of nitrogen. I yielded 212 last year. My local ethanol plant has a conversion ratio of 2.89 gallons per bushel. So when you take 2.89 times the 2 cents, that means that my reduction is worth to them about 5.78 cents. 5.78 cents on my reduction, that means that the value that my crop is producing is worth about $1.92 a bushel. Now, they've got to get below 50, which my local ethanol plant is very close. But there's some real money to be had and to be shared. And I just want to make sure that farmers are aware of this and know what your data is, and that if there's an opportunity for us to collaborate with our ethanol friends, we're ready to rock and roll. Pipelines layer on top of this, but the on-farm piece is what we all can control here. And then there's additional stackable value that can be garnered. There's ethanol plants and biofuel manufacturers all over. This does go for for soybeans, for sorghum, biofuel manufacturers all over the place. We've got farmers all over the place as well. Let's go to the last couple things here. So this is the overall process. Today,